Have you ever had that moment where you're sitting at your kitchen table? Maybe it's a Sunday night, and you start doing the math in your head. You think about what you have in your bank account, what's in your retirement fund, maybe the equity in your home if you own one, and then you subtract everything you owe. And when you finally arrive at that number, you have absolutely no idea if it's good or bad. You don't know if you should feel proud of yourself or terrified. You don't know if you're ahead of the game or quietly falling behind in a race you didn't even realize you were running. Most people have been in that exact moment. And the frustrating part isn't the number itself. It's the fact that nobody ever told you what the number was supposed to be. My name is Nick, and I spend a lot of time thinking about money, personal finance, and why some people end up financially free while others work their entire lives and still come up short. If you want an honest, no-fluff look at how money actually works and what you can do to get ahead of most people, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button if this video helps you see your financial situation a little more clearly.
Now, before we get into the actual benchmarks, I want to ask you something. When you think about your financial progress, what are you actually measuring? Most people measure their income. They think about how much they make per year, whether they got a raise recently, how their salary compares to their friends or their coworkers. And while income matters, it is probably the least useful number for measuring your actual financial health. Here's why. Two people can earn the exact same salary and end up in completely different financial positions after 20 years. One person earns $80,000 a year, lives modestly, invests consistently, and avoids unnecessary debt. The other earns the same $80,000, upgrades their lifestyle every time they get a raise, carries credit card balances, and leases a new car every 3 years. After 2 decades, those two people are living in completely different financial realities, even though they made the same money the entire time. This is why net worth is the only number that tells the real story. Net worth is simple. It's everything you own minus everything you owe. Your bank accounts, your investment accounts, your retirement funds, the equity in your home, the value of any other assets you own. Subtract your mortgage balance, your car loans, your student debt, your credit card balances, and anything else you owe. Whatever is left is your net worth. And that single number tells you more about your financial health than your salary, your job title, or the car sitting in your driveway ever could.
Now here's where things get really interesting. Most people who look up net worth benchmarks online find numbers that are either wildly skewed by billionaires at the top or so depressingly low that beating them feels like winning a participation trophy. So what I want to give you today are honest, realistic benchmarks. Numbers that reflect what a financially disciplined person with a reasonable income can and should achieve at every stage of their life. Not what the average person has, because frankly, the average person is not doing well enough to use as a benchmark, but what a person who is making smart, consistent decisions should have. And then we're going to talk about why most people aren't hitting these numbers, because I promise you, the reasons go a lot deeper than just spending too much on coffee. Let's start at the beginning. If you're under 30, here's the honest truth about where your net worth should be. By the time you hit 25, you should ideally be at or close to zero. That might sound like a low bar, but consider what zero actually means. It means your assets equal your liabilities. No net debt dragging you backward. If you went to college and came out with student loans, getting to zero by 25 is genuinely hard, and it's okay if you're not quite there. But zero is the target. Negative net worth at 25 is a yellow flag. Not a catastrophe, but something to take seriously.
Here's something a lot of people in their early 20s don't think about. Every dollar of student loan debt you carry beyond graduation is a dollar working against you before you've even had a chance to start building. If you graduated with $40,000 in student loans and you're making minimum payments, you could easily be 28 or 29 before your net worth even crosses zero. That's nearly a decade of your earning life where compound interest is working against you instead of for you, and those are years you can never get back. By age 30, the benchmark shifts significantly. A financially on-track 30-year-old should have a net worth equal to roughly half their annual income. So if you're earning $60,000 per year, you should be approaching $30,000 in net worth by the time you blow out those birthday candles.
If you're earning $80,000, you're looking at $40,000 as the target. This accounts for the reality that your 20s are expensive. You're establishing yourself, potentially paying off student debt, and likely haven't had many years of serious investing behind you yet. But half your income by 30 is the floor, not the ceiling. Here's something worth pausing on for a second. According to Federal Reserve data, the median net worth for Americans under 35 is less than $14,000. Less than $14,000. If you're 30 years old, earning $60,000 a year, and your target is $30,000, the median person your age has less than half of what you should be shooting for. That's not a minor gap. That's a fundamental difference in financial trajectory. And it's a gap that gets harder to close with every year that passes.
Now let's talk about your 30s, because this is the decade where financial decisions start compounding in a really serious way in both directions. By age 35, you should have a net worth equal to roughly 1 to 2 times your annual income. If you're earning $70,000, that means somewhere between $70,000 and $140,000 in net worth. This is the range where home equity starts becoming a meaningful factor for a lot of people. Retirement accounts are growing with several years of contributions behind them, and hopefully high-interest debt from your 20s is gone or nearly gone. The reason this range widens so much between 1 and 2 times income is that your 30s are also the decade where lifestyle inflation does the most damage. You're earning more than you were at 25, which means you have more money to either build wealth or spend on a bigger lifestyle. The people who hit 2 times their income by 35 are typically the ones who resisted the urge to upgrade everything the moment their salary went up. The people sitting at 1 times their income or below are usually the ones who let their spending grow as fast as their earnings.
Think about what lifestyle inflation actually looks like in practice. At 28, you're driving a used car with no payment. By 32, you've convinced yourself you deserve something newer. At 29, you're splitting a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate. By 33, you've signed a lease on your own place with a home office you use twice a month. At 30, you're cooking most of your meals at home. By 34, you've got 6 food delivery apps on your phone and you're using all of them. None of these upgrades feel dramatic in the moment, but collectively, they can add $1,500 to $2,000 per month to your spending. And that's $1,500 to $2,000 per month that is not going toward your net worth. By age 40, the benchmark moves to 2 to 3 times your annual income in net worth. If you're earning $90,000 by 40, you should be looking at somewhere between $180,000 and $270,000. At this point, compound interest is starting to do meaningful work on your behalf if you've been investing consistently. Your retirement accounts should have enough history behind them that the growth is becoming noticeable. Home equity, if you own property, should be a significant contributor to your total picture. Now, here's where the reality check gets a little uncomfortable. The Federal Reserve data shows that the median net worth for Americans between 35 and 44 is around $91,000. If the benchmark for a 40-year-old earning $90,000 is between $180,000 and $270,000, the median person in that age bracket has roughly half of what they should have. And remember, we're not comparing against some ideal of perfection here. We're comparing against what's genuinely achievable with reasonable income and reasonable discipline. So, why are so many people falling this far behind? I want to spend a few minutes here because I think most explanations you'll hear are too superficial. The usual answer is that people spend too much and save too little. And while that's technically true, it doesn't explain the mechanism. It doesn't tell you why that pattern is so persistent and so hard to break, even for people who genuinely want to do better. Here's what's actually happening for most people. There are 3 structural forces working against net worth accumulation that most financial content completely ignores. The first is what I call the income illusion. When your paycheck goes up, your brain interprets that as permission to spend more. This isn't a character flaw. It's a deeply wired psychological response. You feel like you've earned an upgrade. The problem is that every lifestyle upgrade you make is not a one-time expense. It's a recurring commitment. The nicer apartment costs more every single month. The newer car costs more every single month. The upgraded subscriptions, the better restaurants, the more frequent vacations.
every single one of these is a permanent increase in your monthly burn rate. And every dollar that goes to your burn rate is a dollar that isn't building your net worth.
What makes this particularly destructive is the social dimension. When your income goes up and you get promoted or land a better job, the people around you often expect your lifestyle to reflect that. There's a subtle social pressure to look the part, to drive the right car, live in the right neighborhood, wear the right things. And most people underestimate how powerful that pressure is until they're standing in a dealership signing papers on a car they couldn't really justify 3 months earlier. The second force is what I call the debt delay. Most people in their 30s and 40s are still carrying debt from decisions they made in their 20s. Student loans, car loans, credit card balances from years ago that never quite got paid off. This debt is a direct weight on your net worth. Every dollar you owe is a dollar subtracted from everything you've built. And what makes this particularly insidious is that the interest on this debt is constantly growing, which means the weight gets heavier over time if you're only making minimum payments. You can be doing everything else reasonably well and still find your net worth crawling forward because old debt is quietly draining it from below. The third force is the most underrated one. It's the absence of investment growth. Most people understand they should be saving money. Far fewer understand that saving money and investing money are not the same thing. Money sitting in a savings account earning 1 or 2% is not building your net worth in any meaningful way after inflation. Money invested in a diversified portfolio of index funds earning 7 or 8% annually over 20 or 30 years is a completely different story. The gap between someone who saved consistently but kept it in cash versus someone who invested consistently in the market is staggering by the time retirement approaches. And yet a shocking number of people are sitting on large savings account balances, wondering why their net worth isn't growing the way they expected. Let's continue through the benchmarks, because the stakes get even higher as we move into your 50s and 60s. By age 50, a financially on-track person should have a net worth of 3 to 5 times their annual income. If you're earning $100,000 at 50, that means somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. This is the decade where compound interest really begins to show its full power. If you've been investing since your late 20s or early 30s, you now have 20-plus years of growth stacked up. Your contributions are likely at their peak as your career earnings hit their highest point. And if you own a home, you may be approaching the point where the equity is substantial. But this is also the decade where a lot of people start doing the math and realizing they're in trouble. The Federal Reserve data shows that the median net worth for Americans between 45 and 54 is around $168,000. If the benchmark for a 50-year-old earning $100,000 is between $300,000 and $500,000, the typical person in that age group has less than half the lower end of the range. And at 50, you don't have 30 years to course correct. You might have 15 years before retirement becomes a real conversation. And 15 years goes a lot faster than it sounds when you're in the middle of it. This is also the decade where a lot of people make a critical mistake. They see their retirement account balances growing for the first time in a way that feels real and significant, and they relax. They start thinking they figured it out. They loosen up on their saving rate, maybe take on a little more debt for a home renovation or a vacation they've been putting off. And that relaxation at exactly the wrong moment can cost them years of retirement readiness without them even realizing it.
By age 60, the benchmark is 5 to 7 times your annual income.
If you're earning $100,000 as you approach retirement, you should be looking at somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000 in net worth. This is the number that will actually support a meaningful retirement when combined with Social Security. It's the number that gives you options. The number that means retirement is something you choose when you're ready, rather than something that's forced on you when your body or your employer makes the decision for you. The Federal Reserve data for Americans between 55 and 64 shows a median net worth of around $212,000. Against a benchmark of $500,000 to $700,000, the typical person approaching retirement age has less than half of what they actually need. And remember, these are people who are within a decade of stopping work. This isn't a problem that has 20 years to fix itself. This is a problem that requires serious action right now, today,
not after the next vacation or the next holiday season or whenever it feels like a more convenient time to start. Now, I want to be direct with you about something, because this is the part of the video where a lot of personal finance content takes a wrong turn. The point of sharing these benchmarks is not to make you feel terrible about where you are right now. It's to give you the honest picture that most people never get. Because here's what I've noticed. When people don't have clear benchmarks, they tend to assume they're doing about as well as everyone else. And when you assume you're doing about as well as everyone else, you feel no urgency to change. You tell yourself things are fine. You'll get serious about investing next year. You'll pay off that card once things slow down at work. You'll start budgeting after the holidays.
But when you see the actual numbers, when you see that the median 50-year-old has less than half the net worth they should, suddenly average doesn't feel like a safe place to be. So let's talk about the two levers that actually determine your net worth trajectory. Because at the end of the day, there are really only two things you can meaningfully control. The first lever is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. This sounds simple, almost insultingly simple, but the execution is where most people fall apart. The goal is to make that gap as wide as possible and protect it ferociously every time your income goes up. Every raise, every bonus, every side income you generate is an opportunity to widen the gap. The trap is closing the gap every time income rises by immediately upgrading your lifestyle to match. If you can keep your spending relatively flat while your income grows, the math starts working powerfully in your favor. And not gradually, dramatically. The second lever is what you do with the gap. Money sitting idle is not building net worth efficiently. The people who hit and exceed these benchmarks are almost universally the people who invest the surplus consistently in assets that grow over time. Index funds, real estate, business ownership. The vehicle matters less than the habit of consistently putting the gap to work in something that compounds. Money in a checking account doesn't compound. Money in a high-yield savings account barely keeps up with inflation. Money invested in a diversified portfolio over 20 years is a fundamentally different kind of money.
Here's what this looks like in practice. If you're 35 and behind where you should be, the path forward is not complicated, even if it's not easy. First, figure out exactly what your net worth is right now. Add up everything you own and subtract everything you owe. Get a real number. Write it down. Most people have never actually done this exercise, which is part of the problem. You cannot navigate toward a destination you've never actually identified. Second, calculate the gap between where you are and where the benchmark says you should be. That gap is your target. Third, figure out how much you can realistically invest every month and what rate of return you need to close that gap before retirement. There are calculators that will do this math for you in about 2 minutes. Fourth, automate that investment so it happens before you have the chance to spend the money. Behavior follows structure. If the money is gone before you can touch it, your spending adjusts accordingly. This isn't a willpower strategy. It's a systems strategy. And systems beat willpower every single time. If you're already at or ahead of the benchmarks, don't let that success make you complacent. The number one mistake I see from people who are ahead is that they relax their habits at exactly the wrong moment. They've hit the milestone, they feel good about it, and they start letting lifestyle creep back in. Then 5 years later, they're wondering why the needle stopped moving.
Here's the bottom line. Net worth is the scoreboard of your financial life. Not your salary, not your job title, not your car, not your house. The scoreboard is the number you get when you add up everything you own and subtract everything you owe. And right now, the typical American at almost every age bracket is sitting well below where that scoreboard should be. But here's what I find genuinely encouraging about all of this. These benchmarks are not reserved for people who went to the right schools or inherited money or stumbled into a six-figure career at 23. They're achievable for a regular person with a regular income who makes a handful of smart, consistent decisions over time. The math is not complicated. The discipline is the hard part. And the fact that you're here, watching a video about net worth benchmarks and actually thinking seriously about your financial trajectory, already puts you ahead of most people who will never ask these questions at all. The benchmarks are the map. You already have the ability to follow it. The only question is whether you're going to use it.